Hidden in the depths of certain isolated American regions, a dark and disturbing reality persists, where genetic intertwining between close relatives has resulted in generations of silent suffering that few dare to mention. This is the legacy of the most degenerate incestuous communities in the USA, a reality forged from decades of deformed descendants. In the heart of the Appalachian in 1947, a mountainous region stretching across several eastern American states, deep valleys and steep mountains created pockets of isolation. Within these pockets, entire communities remain separated from the rest of civilization for decades, sometimes even centuries. Established in a remote valley of Pine Mountain, Kentucky, in the late 19th century by three pioneer families, the Hartleys, the Dawsons, and the Mallisters, one such community found its home. A perfect condition for practices of union between close relatives to become institutionalized, as family tradition was created by the extreme geographical isolation combined with a deep distrust of outsiders. The dark history of the Dawson family is one such case, a history that only came to light when public health authorities, alerted by reports of unusual medical conditions, visited the region in 1947. A confidential report, which remained archived for decades, was written by Dr. A. Robert Caldwell, a physician sent by the Kentucky Department of Public Health. "What I found in Pine Mountain defies human understanding," he wrote in his personal notes, stating that it raises disturbing questions about communities that completely isolate themselves from modern society. He documented that the Dawson family, led by 67-year-old patriarch Elijah Dawson, had established a pattern of marriages between cousins for at least 4 generations. This endogamous circle closed even further over time, resulting in unions between siblings, uncles, and nieces, and even fathers and daughters. A community where almost everyone shared a dangerously similar genetic load was the result. Hostility met Dr. Caldwell when he arrived at the valley. A collection of rustic cabins scattered along a mountain stream was where the Dawson community lived. The most impressive thing to him was the oppressive silence hanging over the place. There were no children playing or running as one would expect, he reported, just suspicious glances from people hiding behind tattered curtains. Only with the help of Martha Dawson, a 19-year-old born from a relationship between first cousins, who were themselves children of cousins, did Caldwell gain access. Martha was one of the few without obvious physical characteristics of the family's prolonged consanguinity. "Doctor, no one from here ever leaves, and those who leave don't come back," Martha explained in her first meeting with Caldwell. "We are different, and they know it out there." A devastating reality was documented by the doctor in the following weeks. An alarming pattern of medical conditions was identified among approximately 40 members of the Dawson community: reduced stature, facial malformations, extra digits on hands and feet, congenital heart problems, and, most disturbingly, a high rate of cognitive delay. Of the 12 children born in the last decade, 9 had some degree of intellectual impairment. Samuel Dawson, 12, was the most emblematic case. He was the son of first cousins who were, in turn, children of siblings who married their own cousins. A disproportionately small head, widely spaced eyes, short stature, and an inability to speak more than a few simple words were his conditions. His younger brother, Joseph, 8, had been born with a serious heart defect and 5 fingers on each hand. "The isolation is not just geographic, but genetic," wrote Caldwell. "Each birth perpetuates and intensifies recessive traits that in a more diverse population would rarely manifest." What he called family purity was fiercely defended by patriarch Elijah. "The Dawson blood is strong," he stated in a rare conversation with the doctor. "We don't need strangers to weaken what we've built here." Caldwell later discovered that this belief had roots in the family's traumatic past. The first Dawsons had fled religious persecution in the 1880s, settling in this remote valley with the belief that the outside world was corrupted. The most alarming situation involved Jeremiah Dawson's immediate family, Elijah's son, who had married his half-sister Rebecca. Of the 6 children born from this union, only 3 survived beyond infancy, all presenting distinctive physical characteristics: asymmetric faces, underdeveloped jaws, and severe vision problems. 2 could not walk without assistance due to bone malformations in their legs. Check if you're already subscribed to this channel. Stories like the Dawsons remain hidden for decades, and only here do you have access to in-depth investigations into these families forgotten by official history. Subscribe now to not miss any detail of this disturbing journey through the darkest secrets of rural America. A broader investigation was triggered by Dr. Caldwell's report on the Dawsons, revealing similar patterns in neighboring communities. In an adjacent valley, the Hartleys maintained similar practices, albeit on a smaller scale, with the crucial difference of occasionally allowing marriages with members of other isolated families. This small difference resulted in visibly distinct genetic effects. While the Dawsons presented more severe conditions, the Hartleys demonstrated a milder, though equally concerning, pattern of genetic anomalies. The Hartleys show us what could happen if the Dawsons had allowed even a minimum of genetic diversity in their lineage, noted the doctor. The difference is significant. The case of the Pine Mountain communities caught the attention of Dr. Elelonina Fleming, a geneticist from Columbia University, in 1949. She had studied the effects of inbreeding in isolated populations and, with limited permission, managed to collect blood samples. What we found in Pine Mountain represents an extreme case of genetic drift in isolated populations, Fleming wrote in a 1952 scientific paper. She explained that when a population reproduces exclusively within a very small group, certain genetic variants may be amplified or eliminated by mere chance. Alarming levels of up to 25% were reached by the coefficient of inbreeding in the most endogamous families like the Dawsons, a measure equivalent to the genetic sharing between parent and child. The psychological and social impact on children was one of the most disturbing aspects documented by both researchers. Daniel Dawson, a 14-year-old boy born from the union of second cousins, who were in turn children of cousins, had a distinctive physical appearance that made him a target of ridicule. He kept his gaze down constantly and spoke in almost inaudible whispers, showing clear signs of deep social trauma, reported Fleming. Martha Dawson, who initially helped Dr. Caldwell, revealed to Fleming that many young women in the community lived in a constant state of silent despair. "Nobody asks what we want," she confided. "When the time comes, they simply tell us who we're going to marry. Some try to run away, but where to go?" A revealing contrast was offered by the situation of the Mallisters, the third original family. Although they had started with similar practices, a family dispute in the 1920s resulted in several young members leaving, forcing those who remained to seek partners in neighboring communities. As a result, genetic conditions were notably less prevalent in the younger generation. William Mallister, then 61, reported to Fleming, "My father used to say that pure blood was strong blood. After I saw my nephews being born that way, I started to think differently." That way he referred to were the severe deformities affecting almost 70% of children born in families with higher consanguinity rates. A disturbing pattern was observed by Dr. Fleming. With each successive generation of consanguineous marriages, the severity of conditions increased and the infant mortality rate rose dramatically. In families with the longest history, up to 60% of children died before reaching 5 years of age. A disturbing social phenomenon was also revealed by investigations in Pine Mountain. As the physical effects of inbreeding became more evident, families isolated themselves even more, fearing stigma and persecution. This isolation, in turn, intensified the problem, creating a vicious cycle. "What we witness here," concluded Fleming, "is not just a medical tragedy, but a human one. These families, trapped in cycles of geographic, social, and genetic isolation, have unwittingly created conditions that perpetuate their own suffering." A dramatic turn took place in Pine Mountain in 1953 when a 16-year-old girl, Ruth Dawson, managed to escape the community and reach the town of Harland. Found exhausted and disoriented by a local police officer, she was taken to the town hospital. Dr. James Harrington, the physician responsible, was immediately intrigued by her unusual physical characteristics and her fragmented story. The patient shows clear signs of congenital malformations consistent with a history of prolonged consanguinity, he recorded. Her account of arranged marriages was extremely concerning. "I saw what happened to my cousins," Ruth reported. "I saw how their children were born. I didn't want that for myself." Her case reached local newspapers, triggering a response from state authorities. A delegation of social workers, health officials, and police was sent to investigate. Upon arriving at the Dawson Valley on May 15, 1953, they found a community in apparent abandonment. Empty cabins and personal belongings left behind suggested the residents had departed in haste. It seemed they simply disappeared into the forest like ghosts, wrote Sarah Jenkins, a social worker. Months later, authorities discovered through local hunters that the Dawsons had relocated to an even more remote area in the Cumberland Mountains. When a community is convinced that its survival depends on remaining separate, observed Dr. Fleming, it will find ways to maintain that separation no matter the cost. Meanwhile, a difficult process of adaptation to life outside her community was begun by Ruth Dawson under the protection of state social services. She faced significant challenges, terrified by modern inventions like television and lacking formal education. Have you ever wondered what would lead entire families to isolate themselves from the world and perpetuate practices that cause so much suffering to future generations? Feel free to share in the comments. May God protect these innocent children. This is the reaction many have when learning about cases like the Dawsons, where the true price of extreme isolation is paid by the most vulnerable. In 1955, Ruth gave an anonymous interview to a University of Kentucky psychologist. As long as I can remember, I heard that the outside world was dangerous and sinful, she reported. She described a system where marriages were decided by male elders based on practical considerations, with no consultation of the young people involved. Significant changes were brought to the mountainous regions by the 1960s, particularly President Lyndon Johnson's War on Poverty. In 1964, a mobile medical team reached the area where the Dawsons had relocated, finding the community fragmented into small, isolated family groups. In more than 20 years of medical practice, I have never witnessed such a high concentration of genetic conditions, documented Dr. Margaret O'Leary, who led the team. She encountered situations where the normalization of consanguineous practices was deeply rooted, and her team faced significant resistance when offering assistance. An attempt to document these isolated groups in 1967 by a team from the University of Kentucky was largely frustrated. However, they briefly interviewed a man named James Dawson, who presented subtle physical features and spoke of his family's perpetual connection to the mountains. The director's notes concluded they found the broken fragments of families pushed to the most extreme margins of society. A detailed genealogical study in 1972 revealed that the three original families were already related before settling in Pine Mountain, descending from a small group of Scotch-Irish settlers, an extreme case of the founder effect. Profound changes came to the Appalachians in the 1980s, reducing isolation. In 1983, a comprehensive study led by geneticist Dr. Catherine Reynolds initiated a new phase of research. Her 1986 study revealed that even after generations of outmarriage, participants demonstrated significantly higher levels of homozygosity and rare genetic variants. One participant, Michael Dawson, who had been adopted out and became an accountant, offered a unique perspective. After reconnecting with his roots, he found distant cousins living in poverty with severe health problems. One cousin, Joseph, told him, "We're not special. We're just what happens when people are too afraid of the world out there." Dr. Reynolds' study showed the genetic legacy could last many generations. An informal census in 1990 identified about 120 individuals directly descended from the original families, with about 70% presenting some related medical condition. In 1997, documentarians visiting the original valley found only ruins and an abandoned cemetery. One of the last interviewees, Emma Hartley, who had escaped in her youth, shared a lucid testimony of the community's final days and the guilt she carried for her son's congenital condition. Advanced DNA analysis in the 2000s by researchers like Dr. Thomas Richardson identified distinctive genetic signatures in these populations. Cases showed how the genetic impact could persist for generations, even when parents were not close relatives but shared distant ancestry. In 2005, a genetic education project led by Dr. Jennifer Morris offered counseling and testing to rural communities. The program found that the genetic impact had spread much further than imagined. A 2015 follow-up study created a genetic heat map showing variant dispersion across 5 states. A 2020 investigation estimated that up to 75,000 people living in Appalachian states may carry these variants, most unaware of their connection. Today, the original valley is deserted, and the descendants are dispersed. Some carry visible marks, others invisible genetic variants. The legacy remains a sensitive topic, but for researchers, it is a powerful case study. As Dr. Morris observed, it is a powerful reminder of the fundamental interconnection of all human beings and the profound risks of isolation, be it geographic, social, or genetic. The legacy of Pine Mountain did not end with the community's disappearance into the Cumberland woods. Ruth Dawson's escape in 1953 created a fissure in the wall of silence, but it was a slow and painful unraveling. Under state protection, Ruth was given a new name, Anna, and placed with a foster family in Lexington. The world outside the mountains was a sensory assault, the constant hum of electricity was terrifying, the speed of cars nauseating, and the sheer number of people overwhelming. Dr. James Harrington, the physician who first treated her, became a reluctant father figure. In his private journals, he noted her remarkable resilience alongside profound trauma. The patient exhibits a deep-seated fear of men with beards, reminiscent of the patriarchs, he wrote. Yet, she has an almost preternatural understanding of natural cycles, identifying medicinal plants from memory that this hospital's pharmacists have to look up in textbooks. Anna's adaptation was a daily battle, a testament to the human spirit's capacity to learn, but also a stark illustration of how deeply her upbringing had shaped her. Meanwhile, the authorities' discovery of the abandoned Dawson settlement in 1953 sparked not a rescue mission, but a bureaucratic dilemma. The state file, labeled Pine Mountain, Population Displacement, reveals internal debates. One memo argued for an aggressive intervention. We have a moral and public health imperative to locate these citizens and provide medical care. Another cautioned against a Walker-like scenario in the Appalachians, warning that forcing help on a deeply suspicious community could drive them further into oblivion or trigger violence. The decision was made to monitor and wait, a choice that would haunt some officials for years. Dr. Eleanor Fleming's 1952 paper, while groundbreaking, was met with skepticism by parts of the academic community. Some colleagues accused her of sensationalism or questioned the ethicality of her methods in obtaining blood samples. The Cold War era was uncomfortable with narratives that challenged the image of American progress, and stories of degenerate mountain folk felt like a throwback to a less enlightened time. Frustrated but undeterred, Fleming continued her work, tracking down descendants who had left the mountains before the community's final exodus. In 1958, she interviewed a man named Henry Mallister, who had fled in 1939 after refusing an arranged marriage to his first cousin. Living in Cincinnati, Henry had built a normal life, marrying a woman with no connection to the mountains. Yet, tragedy struck when their firstborn son died hours after birth from a rare congenital defect. Fleming's analysis suggested the defect was likely a recessive trait carried by Henry, a ghost from Pine Mountain. The most pernicious aspect of concentrated consanguinity, she wrote in a follow-up study, is that its legacy is not confined to the isolated group. The genes travel. A person can leave the mountain, but the mountain may not leave their DNA. They can unknowingly pass on these concentrated risks to a new, unsuspecting generation. This finding added a new, terrifying dimension to the crisis, transforming it from a localized tragedy to a diffuse, invisible public health issue. The 1960s brought the outside world crashing into the hollows of Appalachia. The war on poverty meant new roads, schools, and, crucially, mandatory vaccinations and school enrollment. For the scattered Dawson and Hartley descendants, this was a moment of reckoning. The 1964 mobile medical team led by Dr. Margaret O'Leary encountered a complex reality. They found families living in a state of dual consciousness. Publicly, they denied their distinctive features or attributed them to mountain ailments or God's will. Privately, many lived in fear. Dr. O'Leary's team reported treating a young woman for a minor infection who whispered, "My grandma said our family's blood is cursed. Is that what's wrong with me?" Resistance was fierce, but not universal. Some saw the doctors as a lifeline. A breakthrough came when the team treated a child's severe cleft palate, a condition common in the community. The successful surgery was a powerful argument that transcended generations of distrust. Slowly, a few families began to engage, providing fragmented family histories that helped researchers like Dr. Catherine Reynolds in the 1980s piece together the full genealogical puzzle. Dr. Reynolds's 1986 study, utilizing new DNA analysis techniques, confirmed the worst fears. The genetic bottleneck was even more severe than Fleming had estimated. But her work also revealed a surprising finding, a degree of natural selection at play. Certain severe genetic mutations had indeed died out with the children who did not survive to reproduce. The legacy that persisted was a suite of less immediately lethal, but still debilitating, conditions, autoimmune disorders, metabolic issues, and a high prevalence of specific cancers that manifested in adulthood. Michael Dawson, the accountant who reconnected with his roots in the 1980s, became an unexpected advocate. After meeting his cousin Joseph and seeing the ongoing suffering, he used his skills to help descendants navigate the modern healthcare system and access social security benefits for which their conditions qualified them. He also became a vocal proponent of Dr. Jennifer Morris's genetic education project in the 2000s, arguing that knowledge was the only antidote to shame. The project faced its own challenges. Offering genetic counseling to communities with a deep-seated fear of being studied required immense cultural sensitivity. Counselors found that using terms like family trails or shared ancestry was more effective than inbreeding or consanguinity. The genetic heat map, created in 2015, was a powerful visual tool, showing not a concentrated epicenter of decay, but a wide diaspora of risk, a silent echo of the original family's wanderings across 5 states. The story of Pine Mountain is now one of fragments. The 1997 documentary crew found the cemetery, its headstones weathered and names erased by time. But Emma Hartley's testimony, given when she was in her 70s, provided a poignant epilogue. "We thought we were preserving something pure," she said, her voice steady but her hands trembling. "But we were just preserving fear. I look at my grandson, who has the same heart problem my brother had, and I know I carry the guilt for that. But his mother knew, she had him tested, he sees a special doctor in Knoxville. That's the difference. We hid in the shadows. They have a chance to step into the light. The valley is quiet now." The rusted remains of a child's tricycle lie half buried in the soil near a foundation stone. The wind carries no whispers of the Dawsons, Hartleys, or Mallisters. But their story is not just a relic of a forgotten America. It is a permanent, cautionary chapter in our understanding of human genetics, a stark reminder that the choices of one generation, driven by isolation, ideology, or fear, can write themselves into the very bodies of generations to come. It is a story about the price of purity and the profound, essential need for the other. If this video reached you, if this story of silence and suffering resonated with you, then you understand why these investigations matter. This isn't just history, it's a living legacy. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What responsibility do we have to communities that choose isolation? How do we balance respect for culture with the imperative to prevent harm? The conversation is the first step toward ensuring such suffering remains in the past. Subscribe for more deep dives into the forgotten corners of our shared history.